There is a settlement in Terrebonne Parish that does not appear on any current Louisiana state map. A Corps of Engineers access report filed in 1987 references it by name in 3 places. All 3 were blacked out before the report was released under a public records request in 2019. And there is a man in a town called Dulac who, when asked about the water to the south, will tell you there is nothing out there worth finding. He has said this since 1994. He has not changed a single word. Louisiana has 19,000 square miles of wetlands. Most of it has been surveyed, charted, and named. 7 areas have not. Some were closed with reasons that do not hold up to a single question. Some were never explained at all. We are counting down the most forbidden. It gets much darker. Number 7. The United States Army Corps of Engineers designated a 2,200-acre corridor within the Atchafalaya Basin floodway as a restricted access zone in March of 1991. The stated reason was levee integrity monitoring. That designation was renewed in 1997, in 2004, in 2011, and again in 2018. Each renewal cited the same 4-word justification: ongoing structural assessment operations. No assessment has ever been published. No structural findings have been released to the public in 33 years. Here's what nobody tells you. The levee sections adjacent to the restricted corridor were assessed and cleared in a 1994 USACE report, project number MVN-91-C-0047, filed through the New Orleans District Office. That report covers every levee segment in the basin. It does not mention the restricted corridor. It does not acknowledge that the corridor exists. A zone actively under structural assessment produced 0 entries in the assessment report, filed 3 years into that assessment. A USACE civil engineer named Raymond Thibodeau worked the New Orleans district from 1989 to 2003. In a 2006 interview with the Baton Rouge Advocate, he said he had submitted 2 internal queries about the corridor's omission from the 1994 report. Both were returned without response. His supervisor told him, verbally, that the corridor fell under a separate review process. Thibodeau asked which process. He was told he did not have clearance for that answer. He left the Corps in 2003. He has not spoken publicly about it since. Picture yourself at the basin's edge in early November. The water is the color of strong tea. Cypress knees break the surface in every direction. There is no marked boundary, no sign, just a GPS coordinate on a federal document that says this area is under active assessment. The water past that coordinate looks the same as the water behind you. Something is different. The Corps has been certain of that for 33 years. They have not said what. That is only number 7. It gets much darker. Number 6. Bayou Chene was a functioning community. It sat on high ground, relative high ground by Atchafalaya standards, along Bayou Chene in St. Mary Parish. By the 1940 census, it held 112 residents, fishermen, trappers, families who had been there for 4 generations. The Louisiana Department of Public Works filed an easement order in September of 1952. Within 18 months, every resident had left. The official record describes this as voluntary relocation due to flood risk. There are no relocation payments in any public disbursement record from that period. Not one. Here's what nobody tells you. A state archivist named Louise Fontenot, working in the Louisiana State Archives in Baton Rouge, flagged an anomaly in 2011 during a routine digitization project. She found a secondary file attached to the 1952 easement order, a handwritten annex, 4 pages, partially water damaged. The annex referenced a federal agency with an acronym she did not recognize. She requested guidance from her supervisor. 2 weeks later, the annex had been reclassified. It was removed from the digitization queue. Fontenot submitted a written inquiry to the state archivist's office in January 2012. She received a response in March confirming the document existed, but noting it was restricted under a federal cooperative agreement. No agreement number was cited. She retired from the archives in 2014. The annex has not reappeared in any public catalog. The 1940 census lists the names of 112 people at Bayou Chene. The 1960 census lists 0. In those 8 years, an entire community left, and the paper trail explaining why was quietly reclassified. The bayou is still there, the high ground is still there, the structures rotted in place for decades. Some of the foundations are still visible at low water. Picture yourself on a flat-bottomed boat moving through Bayou Chene on a gray February morning. The water is low, the cypress are bare, concrete block foundations emerge from the mud on both banks. 1, then another, then 6 more. A community stood here. They left without a recorded reason and without a recorded payment. The water moved back in. the bayou kept its answer. That is only number 6. It gets much worse. Number 5. The last islands, Îles Dernières, are a chain of barrier islands off the Terrebonne Parish coast. They were accessible to the public until August of 1993. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries closed the Central Island group that month, citing critical shorebird nesting habitat. The closure covered 840 acres. It has been renewed without modification every 2 years since. That is 31 years of identical renewal language. No nesting survey from the restricted zone has been published in that period. The Louisiana Natural Heritage Program database, which catalogs protected species activity statewide, contains no nesting records for the closed acreage. Here's what nobody tells you. In October 1992, 10 months before the closure, a joint survey team from the Louisiana Geological Survey and the Minerals Management Service conducted a 3-week field study of the island chain. Their report, MMS Study 9-2-0047, was submitted to the Gulf of Mexico Regional Office in December 1992. A Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2016 by a researcher at the University of New Orleans produced a heavily redacted version. 17 of the report's 22 pages were withheld in full. The cover sheet and the table of contents were released. The table of contents lists a section titled Subsurface Anomaly Assessment, Central Island Group. That section does not exist in the release pages. The MMS said the withheld material fell under exemptions protecting internal deliberative process. A wildlife and fisheries biologist named Carol Arsenault was assigned to monitor the closure from 1993 to 2001. She had been instructed not to land on the Central Island Group during her monitoring duties. She was to observe from the water. She asked her district supervisor why, and was told the restriction came from above her supervisor's level. She monitored for 8 years from a boat. She retired in 2007. Picture yourself anchored 50 yards off the Central Island on a still October afternoon. The beach is white and completely empty. No birds move on it. The closure sign on the post at the waterline says, Critical Nesting Habitat. The beach shows no evidence of nesting. It shows no evidence of anything. The island does not move. The island does not explain. The closure renews again in 2 years. That is only number 5. It gets much darker. Number 4. Between 1928 and 1961, a community of workers and their families lived on the southeastern edge of Lafourche Parish, clustered around the Leeville oil field infrastructure. State road maps from 1947 and 1953 show a named settlement with a post office designation. The community appears in Louisiana Public Service Commission filings as a rate district through 1958. In 1962, it does not appear. No dissolution order exists in the Commission's public records. No final rate filing. No administrative closure. The settlement is present in 1958. It is absent in 1962. Nothing in the public record accounts for the gap. Here's what nobody tells you. A researcher named David Melanson, a graduate student in Louisiana history at Tulane University, began investigating the settlement in 2008. He located 14 former residents or their direct descendants. 11 agreed to speak with him. 9 of the 11 described the same event, a series of visits from men in unmarked vehicles in the spring of 1960. The men told residents the land was being acquired. No agency was named. No paperwork was left. Melanson submitted his dissertation chapter on the settlement in 2010. His advisor returned it with a note recommending he remove the oral history section as insufficiently documented. Melanson disagreed. He left Tulane without completing his degree. He shared his interview transcripts with a New Orleans attorney in 2013. The attorney has not filed any action. The transcripts have not been published. 9 people, interviewed separately, described the same unmarked vehicles and the same conversation. None of them received written documentation of any kind. The land they left is now held in a series of shell company ownership chains that terminate in Delaware registration filings. The original acquisition is not in the Lafourche Parish conveyance records. Picture yourself on the highway south of Cutoff on a hot July afternoon. The marsh opens on both sides. There is a shell road that turns east and becomes a gravel road and then becomes 2 ruts in the grass and then becomes nothing. 9 people said men came down a road like this and told them to leave. The land absorbed them and kept moving. No name is on any sign. That is only number 4. It gets much worse. Number 3, Manchac Swamp sits between Lake Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain. The Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality designated a 1,100-acre section of the swamp interior as a restricted access buffer zone in April of 2001. The stated reason was contaminated sediment remediation from a former industrial corridor. A remediation timeline was filed with the designation cleanup completion projected for 2008. It is now 2026. No completion notice has been filed. No interim status report has been published since 2003. Here's what nobody tells you. The 2003 interim report, LDEQ docket number 2001-0847, is available on the LDEQ public portal. It is 44 pages. Pages 17 through 31 are blank. Not redacted, not missing. Blank pages with headers, page numbers, and section titles, and no content. The section titles on those blank pages are Subsurface Core Analysis Results, Anomalous Reading Log, Sectors 4 through 9, and Field Observation Notes, November 2002. The content of all three sections was never entered. No errata notice was filed. No corrected version was submitted. An LDEQ field technician named Marcus Webb was assigned to the Manchac site from 2001 to 2004. He filed a formal internal complaint in February 2004, alleging that field observation data he had personally collected was not reflected in the 2003 interim report. His complaint was closed 3 weeks later with the notation, "Data incorporated into restricted supplemental filing." Webb requested access to the restricted supplemental filing. His request was denied. He resigned from LDEQ in September 2004. In a letter later shared online in 2017, he wrote, "I recorded what I recorded. Someone decided it needed to disappear. I don't know what it meant. I know it was real." Picture yourself in a flat-bottomed aluminum boat at the boundary of the restricted zone on a November morning. The water is black and completely still. Cypress trees rise on all sides. A yellow buoy marks the access boundary. The 2003 report says the area underwent sediment analysis in November 2002. 15 pages of that analysis are blank. The swamp does not offer corrections. It does not offer anything. That is only number 3. It gets much darker. Number 2. Delacroix Island sits at the end of Louisiana Highway 300 in St. Bernard Parish. In June of 1999, the St. Bernard Parish government filed an emergency resolution suspending public access to the southern 600 acres of the island and the adjacent marsh corridor. The resolution cited an active hazardous material assessment. That assessment was assigned to a contractor called Gulf South Environmental Services, LLC. The company dissolved in 2002. No final assessment report was ever filed with the parish. The access suspension was never formally lifted. It has simply remained. Here is what nobody tells you. A paralegal named Teresa Rodrigue, working for a Chalmette law firm, began researching the suspension in 2009 on behalf of a family that had owned property in the restricted area since 1941. She filed a public records request with St. Bernard Parish in October 2009. The parish produced the original 1999 resolution and nothing else. No contractor correspondence, no assessment documents, no communications between parish officials and Gulf South Environmental Services. She then requested the procurement file for the Gulf South contract. The parish responded that the file had been lost during Hurricane Katrina. Katrina struck in 2005. The procurement file would have been created in 1999. The parish offices in question did not flood in Katrina. Rodriguez confirmed this with FEMA flood maps. She documented the discrepancy in a memo to her supervising attorney. The family's case was settled out of court in 2011. The settlement terms are sealed. A family owned land on Delacroix Island for 68 years. A contractor was hired to assess it, dissolved before completing the work, and left no records. The parish says the file that would explain all of this was lost in a flood that did not reach the building where the file was stored. The settlement that explains what the family received for their land cannot be read. Picture yourself at the end of Highway 300 on a gray March afternoon. The road ends at a chain-link gate. The marsh beyond it is flat and open and appears identical to the marsh on either side of the gate. A contractor assessed this land 25 years ago and left no record of what they found. The gate is padlocked. The lock is new. Someone changed it recently. That is number 2. Number 1 is different. Number 1. There is no official name for this place that any agency will confirm. It sits in the wetlands south of Terrebonne Parish, accessible only by water. A 1954 Louisiana State Highway map, held in the Louisiana State Library, shows a settlement marker at a set of coordinates that today fall inside a zone the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources has designated as a restricted research area since 1988. The settlement marker has a label, The label is not legible on the available scan. The library's original map, Sheet 47C, Terrebonne-Lafourche Coastal Index, was requested by a researcher named Paul Arsenault in 2017. The archivist told him the sheet was available. When the folder was retrieved, Sheet 47C was not inside it. The catalog still lists it. The archivist filed an internal loss report. Arsenault received a copy. The report confirms the sheet existed as recently as a 2009 inventory audit. It has not been located since. Here's what nobody tells you. Arsenault spent 4 days in Terrebonne Parish in October 2018. He spoke with 11 people in the communities of Dulac, Montaigu, and Chauvin. He asked about the coordinates from the 1954 map. 3 people ended the conversation immediately. 4 said they did not know what he was referring to. 2 told him there was nothing out there. 1 told him, specifically and without elaboration, that whatever was out there had been out there long before any map and would be there long after any map stopped looking for it. One man, a retired commercial fisherman who had worked those waters for 40 years, sat with Arsenault for 20 minutes. He did not speak for the first 10. Then he said, "I have been past that water. Once. I did not go back. I'm not going to tell you why." He did not say why. He did not say what he saw. He confirmed, when asked directly, that he had seen something. He said the word, yes. That was the complete answer he was willing to give. Arsenault published a brief account of his research in a regional history journal in 2020. The coordinates were not included. He said in an email, when asked why, that he had agreed not to publish them. He did not say with whom he had made that agreement. The LDNR Restricted Research Area designation filed in 1988 is 11 lines long. It names no specific research. It names no research institution. It names no completion criteria. It has been renewed 4 times. The renewal notices are each a single sentence. They read, "Restriction remains necessary for the protection of ongoing resource assessment activities. No assessment has been published. No resource has been named." Picture yourself on a shallow draft boat moving south from Dulac on an October evening. The light is going flat and gray. The marsh grass on both sides is the color of old straw. There are no other boats. There is no sound except the motor and the water. The coordinates from a map that no longer exists are in your GPS. You are getting close to them. A man who fished this water for 40 years went past this point once and did not go back. He confirmed he saw something, and he did not say what. The marsh ahead looks identical to the marsh behind you. It is not. Some of these places were closed because something went wrong. Some were closed because something was found. And some, the ones with no name, no record, and no explanation that holds together under a single question, some were not closed at all. They were simply made difficult to find, and they have been patient about it ever since.